I want you to picture the happiest moment of your life. Now imagine someone uses that exact moment, that specific joy, that particular vulnerability, as a weapon against you. I was 7 months pregnant. I was wearing a white dress with small yellow flowers that my mother had bought me specifically for that day. My hair was done. My cheeks were flushed with that particular happiness that only comes when you are carrying a life inside you, and the people around you seemed to be celebrating it. There were balloons, pink and gold, a 3-tiered cake with a little fondant baby on top, a table of gifts wrapped in pastel paper. Every woman I knew in one room, my friends, my neighbors, my cousins, my mother, and in the center of it all, smiling the widest smile I had ever seen on her face, my mother-in-law Diane. I should have known then. Diane never smiled that wide unless she was winning something. I just didn't know yet what the prize was. My name is Sophie. I'm 32 years old. I live in Nashville, Tennessee now, in a house that is loud and warm and full of a little girl named Ellie, who just turned 2 and has strong opinions about everything, including which cup her juice goes in and which songs I'm allowed to sing at bedtime. She is the best thing that has ever happened to me. And she almost happened inside the worst ambush of my life. I was married to a man named Ryan for 4 years. Ryan was charming and funny and genuinely good at making you feel, in the early days, like you were the most important person in any room he occupied. He came from a family with money, old Southern money, the kind that comes with a specific set of expectations about how life should look and who belongs inside it. His mother, Diane, ran that family the way a CEO runs a corporation, with strategy, with image management, and with a very clear understanding that every decision existed in service of the larger brand. I was never quite the right fit for the brand. I knew it from the first Thanksgiving. I felt it every Christmas. I understood it completely by our 2nd anniversary when Diane pulled me aside at a family dinner and told me, with that particular warmth that is actually cold all the way through, that she hoped Ryan and I were investing in our foundation because she had seen too many young marriages crumble from neglect. We had been married 14 months. I smiled and said we were very happy, thank you. She patted my hand and walked away. And I stood there with a glass of sweet tea, understanding that the conversation we had just had was not a conversation at all. It was a warning. I want to pause here for just a second, because this story is one I held inside myself for a long time before I was ready to tell it. If you're watching this right now, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you have ever been in a room where the kindness directed at you didn't feel quite right, where the smile was too wide or the gesture too generous and something in your stomach couldn't settle, tell me that too. Because sometimes the most dangerous rooms are the ones decorated the prettiest. Okay, let me take you back. Ryan and I met when I was 26 at a mutual friend's birthday dinner in downtown Nashville. He was across the table from me and he spent the whole evening asking me questions, real questions, the kind that require actual listening to answer, and by the end of the night, I had told him things I don't usually tell people I've known for less than 4 hours. That was Ryan's particular gift. He made you feel seen. He made you feel chosen. What I didn't understand until much later was that Ryan's ability to make you feel chosen was inseparable from his need to have someone choosing him. He didn't love generously. He loved as a transaction, giving attention and warmth in exchange for loyalty and presence, and recalibrating the moment the exchange felt uneven. And the person who had taught him that model of love, who had refined it into an art form over 58 years of living, was Diane. We got married after 2 years of dating in a ceremony that was beautiful and expensive and largely planned by Diane because, as she explained to my own mother at the engagement dinner, she had certain relationships with vendors that would make things easier. My mother, a quiet, practical woman from Knoxville who made her own curtains and grew tomatoes in the backyard, sat across from Diane at that dinner and smiled politely and later told me in the car on the way home that she hoped I knew what I was walking into. I told her she was being unfair. I was wrong. She was being accurate. The first year of marriage was fine. The second was harder. By the 3rd year, Ryan and I had settled into a dynamic that troubled me. He was present when things were good and absent when things required effort. When I raised concerns, he listened with that particular expression of patient understanding that actually means I am waiting for you to finish so we can move on. Diane was always in the background, commenting on our apartment, our social choices, my career. I worked as a pediatric occupational therapist, which Diane found admirable in a tone that suggested she actually found it quaint. She would have preferred something with a more impressive title. Something that looked better in the family newsletter she actually wrote and distributed to her social circle every Christmas. When I got pregnant, genuinely joyfully, unexpectedly pregnant in the spring of our 4th year, I thought things would shift. I thought a baby would soften the edges of everything. Instead, it sharpened them. Ryan became more distracted, not less, more absent. More likely to be at his parents' house on a Sunday evening when I needed him home. More likely to say things like, "My mom thinks we should consider," the 4 sentences I had not asked Diane to weigh in on. I was 7 months pregnant and exhausted and hopeful and completely unprepared for what was coming. The baby shower invitation came from Diane directly. A physical invitation, cream cardstock with gold lettering, delivered to our apartment 3 weeks before the event. It listed a date, a time, a venue, her house. It listed a dress code, garden party casual, light colors preferred. It listed an RSVP deadline. It was the most formal baby shower invitation I had ever seen. I remember showing it to my friend Lauren, who raised her eyebrows slightly and said, "That's very organized." I told myself Diane was just thorough. That this was love expressed in her particular language, through logistics and control and flawless execution. I told myself that whatever her motivations, the result was a room full of people celebrating my daughter, and that was what mattered. My mother drove up from Knoxville the night before and stayed with us. She pressed my white dress and made me eat a proper breakfast the morning of and held my face in her hands before I left and said, "You call me if anything feels wrong." I kissed her cheek and said nothing would feel wrong, Mom. It's a baby shower. I arrived at Diane's house at 11 in the morning. It was stunning. She had hired a decorator, actual floral arrangements, draped fabric on the pergola, a catering table with a full spread. The cake was 3 tiers of champagne and vanilla with sugar flowers and a fondant baby on top. Every surface had been considered. Every detail was perfect. And every woman I knew was there. Lauren, my cousin Beth, my neighbor Priya, 3 women from my book club. My college roommate Cassandra, who had driven 4 hours. My coworker Jun, who was on maternity leave herself. They were all smiling. I stood in that doorway in my white dress with yellow flowers and felt, for one full and genuine minute, completely loved. Diane hugged me at the door, held me slightly longer than usual. "Sae, you look beautiful, sweetheart. Come sit down." I sat in the chair they had decorated for me, a white wooden chair with a floral wreath on the back. My name written in gold across a banner above it. We did the games, we ate the food. I opened gifts, tiny onesies and soft blankets and a white noise machine from Lauren that made. Everyone laughed because she'd bought the exact same one for herself. Everything was perfect. And then, about 90 minutes in, Diane stood up. She tapped her glass lightly with a spoon. The room settled. She smiled at me, that wide smile, the winning smile, and she said, "I hope everyone will forgive me for taking a moment away from the celebration. There's something I'd like to address, for Sophie's sake, because I love her. And because I believe in honesty." I felt something shift in my stomach. Not the baby. Something older and colder than the baby. Diane reached behind her and picked up a manila folder from the side table. She placed it on the gift table in front of me. And she said, in a voice perfectly calibrated to sound like sorrow, "Sophie, honey, Ryan and I have had some very difficult conversations lately. We've all agreed, as a family, that the kindest thing we can do for everyone, including this baby, is to address this now. Before things get more complicated." I looked at the folder. I looked at the room. Every face I trusted was looking at me with an expression I had never seen directed at me before, somewhere between pity and apology and something that looked horribly like agreement. I opened the folder with hands that were not quite steady. Inside were divorce papers, pre-signed by Ryan, 7 months pregnant, sitting in a decorated chair with my name in gold above my head. surrounded by every woman I thought was there to celebrate me. And they had known. They had all known. The room was so quiet I could hear the catering staff moving in the kitchen. Diane was still standing, still with that expression of performed sorrow. She said something about how they hoped I would understand this was coming from love. That they had wanted me surrounded by support when I received this news. That they thought this environment would help me process things calmly. I looked at her for a very long time. And then something happened inside me that I am not sure I can fully explain. The fear left. Not gradually, all at once. Like a light switching off. And what replaced it was something clear and cold and absolutely focused. I closed the folder. I placed my hands flat on top of it. And I looked up at Diane and I said, in a voice I did not recognize as my own because it was so completely steady, "Thank you for the shower, Diane. The flowers are beautiful." Then I picked up my purse. I stood up from my decorated chair. And I turned to the room, to Lauren and Beth and Priya and Cassandra and June, and every woman who had sat in that garden and waited for this moment, and I said, "Thank you all for coming. I'm going to need a few days before I'm able to speak to most of you. Please enjoy the cake." And I walked out. I sat in my car for exactly 6 minutes. Then I called my mother. She answered on the first ring. I said 3 words, "You were right." She said, "I'm already in the car." My mother arrived at our apartment 40 minutes later. I had already called my OB to make sure the stress of what had happened wasn't affecting the baby. The nurse talked me through some breathing. The baby was fine. I was fine. Or rather, I was not fine, but I was going to be, which is a different and more useful thing. My mother sat across from me at the kitchen table and we looked at the folder together. She asked me one question. "What do you want?" Not what did I think Ryan wanted. Not what did Diane expect. Not what did the situation require. What did I want? And I realized, sitting at that table 7 months pregnant with my mother's hand over mine, that nobody in that decorated garden had asked me that question. Not once. Not about the marriage. Not about the divorce. Not about what came next. I had been managed from the beginning. And the baby shower was simply the most elaborate stage of the management. I called a family law attorney that afternoon, one I found myself, from a list I assembled myself, from reviews I read myself. Her name was Patricia Chun, and she had 17 years of experience and a voice like someone who had seen everything and was surprised by nothing. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "The folder they presented, did you sign anything?" I said no. She said, "Good. Don't touch it again until we've spoken properly." We met the following Tuesday. What Patricia explained to me over the next hour reconfigured everything I thought I understood about my situation. In Tennessee, certain protections exist for expectant and new mothers in divorce proceedings. The circumstances of how those papers had been presented, the staged environment, the social pressure, the presence of people who had clearly been briefed in advance, were relevant to questions of coercion. Furthermore, Ryan had signed those papers before presenting them to me through his mother at a social event I had attended, believing it to be a celebration. That sequence of events told a story. Patricia was very interested in that story. I went home and I did something Diane had not anticipated. I wrote everything down. Every detail of that morning, the invitation, the timeline, the room, the folder, the words Diane had used, the faces of the women who had known. I wrote it all while it was fresh, time-stamped it, emailed it to Patricia, and saved 3 copies in 3 different places. Then I called Lauren. Lauren, of all the women in that room, was the one I believed had the smallest stomach for what she'd participated in. We had been friends for 7 years. She had driven me to doctor's appointments. She had sat with me through 3 pregnancy scares before Ellie actually took. She answered after 4 rings. She sounded like she hadn't slept. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I asked her one question. "How long did you know?" Silence. Then, 2 weeks. "Sophie, I'm so sorry." She said it was what Ryan wanted and that you needed support around you, and I didn't think about how it would feel from where you were sitting. I thanked her for being honest. I told her I needed time. I hung up. And I noted for the record that Lauren's account confirmed premeditation. That Diane had organized this event with at least 2 weeks of preparation and had recruited attendees under a specific framing designed to position the ambush as an act of care. Patricia was very, very interested in Lauren's account. The divorce proceedings took 8 months. Ryan had expected them to take 2, I think that the combination of pregnancy hormones and social pressure and the sheer shock of that morning would produce a woman willing to sign quickly and quietly and accept whatever terms had been prearranged. He had not anticipated Patricia Chun. He had not anticipated that I had documentation of the shower, witness accounts of the premeditation, and a forensic accounting of our marital finances that revealed several transfers into a separate account that Ryan had opened 16 months earlier. 16 months. He had been planning this while I was trying to get pregnant, while we were doing ultrasounds and buying baby books and painting the nursery a soft sage green. The financial discovery changed the shape of everything. What Ryan and Diane had designed as a quick, controlled exit, with terms favorable to Ryan, managed by Diane, executed on their timeline, became an 8-month legal process that examined every aspect of our marital finances in detail. The transfers were addressed. The asset division was recalculated accordingly. I received primary custody of Ellie. Child support calculated on Ryan's actual income rather than the reduced figure his initial attorneys had proposed. And a settlement that my mother, practical curtain-making, tomato-growing mother from Knoxville, cried over at the kitchen table when I read it to her. Ryan and Diane received the outcome of their own planning, examined in a courtroom, documented in a legal record, and significantly more expensive than they had budgeted for. The judge, at one point during the proceedings, asked Ryan's attorney to clarify the circumstances under which the divorce papers had first been presented to me. The attorney clarified. The judge looked at Ryan over her glasses for a long moment. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Ellie was born 6 weeks after the proceedings began, healthy, furious, perfect. She arrived into a situation that was legally complicated and emotionally exhausting and more uncertain than I had ever wanted for a child of mine. And she arrived anyway, loudly and completely, with my mother holding my hand and Patricia Chun sending a text that just said, "Thinking of you today." I held Ellie in the hospital that first night, in a room that was quiet and clean and contained only people who were entirely and unconditionally on my side, and I made her a promise. I told her that every room she ever walked into would be one she chose herself. That no celebration in her life would ever contain a hidden agenda. That the people who showed up for her would be people who showed up genuinely, without folders, without pre-signed documents, without 2 weeks of secret preparation. I have kept that promise. We live in Nashville, still different part of the city, smaller house, better light. My mother drives up once a month and stays for a long weekend and makes tomato soup from scratch and teaches Ellie words in the particular accent of Knoxville that I hope Ellie carries her whole life. Lauren and I repaired our friendship slowly and honestly over about 18 months. She has held Ellie and watched her take her first steps and cried genuine tears at Ellie's first birthday. And I genuinely believe that she sits differently in rooms where she's asked to participate in something that doesn't feel right. That matters. People learning things matters. Ryan sees Ellie on the schedule we established. He is present in the specific, structured way that someone who has been given legal parameters is present. It is not warm. But it is consistent, and Ellie knows her father, and that is what I wanted for her. Diane I have not spoken to since I walked out of her garden in my white dress with yellow flowers. She sent a card when Ellie was born. I kept it in a drawer for 3 months and then I threw it away. I think about that morning sometimes. I think about sitting in that decorated chair with my name in gold and a 3-tiered cake and pink and gold balloons and every person I trusted arranged around me like a stage, set for something I hadn't been given the script for. And I think about closing that folder, about placing my hands flat on top of it, about the voice that came out of me, steady and clear and belonging entirely to myself, saying thank you for the flowers. That was the moment I became someone different. Not because I was strong, I didn't feel strong. I felt like someone had removed the floor from underneath me while 100 people watched. But I closed the folder anyway. And I walked out anyway. And I called my mother anyway. And then, one careful decision at a time, one phone call, one meeting, one document, one honest conversation, one sleepless night followed by one more day. I built something from the rubble of that morning that is more solid and more mine than anything. I shared with the people who arranged it. There is something I want you to hear if you are sitting with something heavy tonight. The people who hurt you most carefully, the ones who plan it, who arrange the room, who invite the witnesses, who time it for your most vulnerable moment, those people are banking on one thing. They are banking on you being too shocked to think, too overwhelmed to act, too alone to fight. Close the folder. Walk out. Call the person who drives 4 hours without being asked. And then, one careful, quiet, documented decision at a time. Make them regret every single thing they planned. If this story meant something to you tonight, if it reached something you've been carrying, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've ever sat in a room that felt wrong despite looking right, leave your story in the comments. Every single one deserves to be heard. I'll be reading them.